I believe inner child healing can help us navigate majority of our self-doubt, insecurities, and blocks that prevent us from living to our full potential. In this episode, I share the importance of inner child healing and 8 ways to love on your inner child. Welcome to the Abundance Hack Show, Season 4, where we are focusing on mastery. The last 3 seasons, I gave you the information. Now, we're focusing on integrating it into our lives and embodying it. If you are ready to master your thoughts, emotions, and patterns to feel whole, fulfilled, and really grounded in who you are without dimming your shine so you can live the abundant life that you truly desire, then you are in the right place. Hey M&Ms, thank you for tuning in to the Abundance Hack Show. What are you manifesting in your life today? Before we dive into today's topic, I do want to have a trigger warning on this episode. We are going to be talking about childhood trauma. So if any heavy emotions bubble to the surface, I highly recommend seeking quality therapy. So this is a transformational podcast, but it does not replace therapy. So if something comes up that feels really heavy, definitely speak to a licensed therapist. So I've wanted to do a podcast episode on inner child healing for a while, and I have variations of it. I do have an episode about daddy issues. I have an episode about the mother wound, and I still wanted to dive a little bit deeper because I've been diving deeper in my inner child healing, and it's done wonders for me. So I really wanted to open up the dialogue for how this has benefited me. And I also added a inner child healing sound bath at Bliss Bar Meditation Studio that has been really beautiful, really beautiful. So I had a client that brought her daughter in, and I just think it's so extremely powerful, especially for them to do this work together. Like, how beautiful is that? So this is a topic that is definitely near and dear to my heart, and I have been doing a lot of research, and there is an ACE test. So if you're like, I don't really know, if I have any childhood trauma, this is a really good place to start. So ACE stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences, and it basically gives you situations, and if you have like 4 or more of these, then you had some pretty severe trauma in your childhood. And sometimes we don't know, because if you only know your environment, you may not know that that environment wasn't healthy or was toxic. So this is a really good place to start. And initially I wanted to do the podcast episode on ACE by itself, but I think that there's so much more to talk about than just taking the test. So once you take the test, it's like, okay, what do I do with this information now? And again, I would say seek therapy. And I think that back in the day, therapy would be for someone who experienced something really severe. So like if you've experienced abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, if you had a traumatic experience like a car accident or something of the sort, like anything severe, I think that it was more normalized to seek therapy then. But I think that now it's becoming more normal, even if you didn't experience severe trauma. So grief is trauma, and moving or losing a job can bring up a lot of trauma. So it doesn't always have to be severe. Going through a divorce, I think that is a great reason to seek therapy, because we don't want to continue to repeat patterns from an unhealthy place. So if we have awareness around our unhealthy patterns because of our experiences, we can make better decisions. And a lot of times people think that they can handle these situations on their own, but we all have blind spots. We know what we know what we don't know, but we don't know what we don't know. And if all we've been exposed to is unhealthy situations, unhealthy environments, unhealthy relationships, then we don't know what a healthy relationship actually looks like. And that is why therapy is important, to have a quality therapist that can point out, this isn't healthy. this person is violating you. This situation is toxic. And sometimes we need that. And it's going to allow us to seek out and allow in healthy connections, healthy situations, healthy attention. We're going to be talking about attention, healthy relationships, and also building a healthy relationship with ourselves. So that's really, really, really important. And I'm a huge advocate for therapy anyway, but if you take this ACE test, the ACE, if you take this test and you've experienced 4 or more of these, then it's even more reason for you to seek therapy. And I personally feel like you don't have to go to therapy once a week, even if you just do like a monthly check-in. It's better than nothing. And I think that as a society, like we just went through a pandemic, so everyone experienced trauma. So if you had trauma on top of that, it's a lot. And even just locally, like Florida just had a hurricane. And I think that everyone in Florida, myself included, was on edge because we're still repairing our nervous systems after the pandemic. So a lot of people like to sweep it under the rug, stuff it in the back of the closet, but just because you don't acknowledge your trauma, it doesn't make it go away. I guarantee it's playing out in your career, it's playing out in your relationships, and it's playing out in your relationship with yourself. So how do you know if you should do some inner child healing? So there's some obvious ways: depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation. So my understanding of suicidal ideation is the feeling of not wanting to live. So this is very different than being suicidal. So suicidal is when you are actually trying to hurt yourself. But suicidal ideation is just thoughts of not wanting to be here without any planning to actually harm yourself, but just thoughts of like I'm tired, I don't want to be here anymore. And these are definitely heavy situations. If you have depression, anxiety, or any type of suicidal thoughts or suicidal ideation, definitely doing some inner child healing with a licensed therapist. Now, there are some other things that are not as severe that may not be on your radar. So if you're repeating patterns and attracting people that aren't healthy for you, and when I say repeating patterns, like if you find yourself saying like, "Ugh, why do I find myself in this situation time and time again?" Or in relationships, and this could be business relationships, this could be friends, this could be romantic relationships or marriage, you broke up with a person or someone's out of your life, but you attract the same exact type of behavior just in a different person. So same person, different body, basically. So usually that behavior is replicating how you were treated from a parent. So let's say you had a critical parent, you attract critical people. Let's say you had an absent parent, you attract people that basically abandon you or reject you. And so if you find yourself repeating these patterns, definitely want to do some inner child healing. And then the criticism part, if you're self-critical, so let's really pay attention to our self-talk. Like, do you judge yourself? Are you super hard on yourself? Are you super critical towards yourself? Definitely want to do some inner child healing. The next one is abandonment issues. So if you have abandonment issues, and abandonment issues can show up as you wanting to leave people before you get left. There's so many different ways abandonment issues can show up, but you definitely want to do some inner child healing around that, especially if you had an absent parent, because that is going to show up in your relationships in your adult life for sure. So the next one is sensitive to criticism or rejection. So I did mention the criticism part already, I kind of jumped ahead. But if you're really sensitive to criticism or rejection, then you definitely want to do some inner child healing, because it's probably your inner child basically being hurt every time you experience criticism. So our adult selves usually have a little bit of a thicker skin, but if someone says something to you that really hurts your feelings, usually that's your inner child that's hurt. And when we puff up, we get into ego. And ego, I always say ego isn't a bad thing. Ego is designed to protect your inner child. And so if you love on your inner child and your inner child feels loved, seen, accepted, embraced, nurtured, then your ego doesn't feel the need to flare up as much. So that is the benefit of doing inner child healing. So your inner child isn't throwing a temper tantrum or having a fit or crying because your inner child is loved and accepted and nurtured. The next one is if you experience religious trauma. So there is so much religious trauma, so much. And I think this is a whole can of worms that I'm not going to dive too deep into, but let's just say someone was raised in a religion that made them feel like if you do this, you're going to hell, right? We're told this as kids because a lot of religions lead with fear. And if you are told this, it creates shame, guilt, and resentment that ends up being stored in your body. And so if you feel like, and let's just say it comes to the LGBTQ community. If you were told that homosexuality is a sin and you're going to hell, but you are madly in love with the same sex, that creates a ton of shame and a ton of guilt. And so Brené Brown talks about the difference between shame and guilt. So guilt is, I did something bad. Shame is, I am something bad. And so we want to make sure that we don't have shame, guilt, and resentment stored in our bodies. And sometimes we can resent ourselves, sometimes we can resent others. So it's really important that you do that inner child healing so these heavy emotions are not stored in your body and energetic field because they are toxic. And you know, the work that I do, somatic sound therapy and everything I do at Bliss Bar Meditation Studio is about releasing those dense energies from your physical body and from your energy body. And I really feel like inner child healing is the key to most of this. So the next one is a lot of self-doubt. So self-doubt is huge. I've actually been uncovering a lot of my self-doubt. I spent a good amount of time with my mom during the hurricane, and it helped me realize so much. And so with self-doubt, it causes you to continuously seek external validation. You don't trust yourself. And this is huge. I think that there are two situations where you have parents that would gaslight and manipulate you, and then you have parents that were completely innocent in how they created self-doubt in you unknowingly, so they didn't do it on purpose. Even if they manipulated or gaslit you, it wasn't necessarily on purpose. It could just be generational patterns. So let's say a child fell and scabbed their knee and they're in pain because their knee is bloody and they're crying. A parent can say, shut up, suck it up, like stop crying. And so that completely dismisses what the child feels. And then a parent can innocently say, oh, don't cry, big girls don't cry, big boys don't cry, be a man. And usually that's very innocent, like the parent obviously doesn't mean anything wrong by it, but they're not acknowledging that that child is in pain. So they're saying, you're okay, be a big girl, big girls don't cry, you're okay. So what it does is it creates self-doubt because the child is in pain, but the parent is saying, you're okay, it's not that bad. So it's completely invalidating what the child feels. So that's what creates self-doubt in our adult life, or they're completely dismissing what the child feels. So that sends the message subconsciously that it's not okay to feel what I feel. These feelings are not okay. These emotions are not okay. Especially if a parent gets upset that a child is crying and they say, like aggressively, like, shut up, stop crying. That automatically sends the message to the child, it's not okay for me to feel. And so they no longer feel safe feeling their feelings and emotions. And then that's when we get into people pleasing and constantly apologizing for how we feel. How many times have you seen a person cry and they apologize because they're crying? So I have to say in my studio all the time when my clients start crying, like, don't apologize for crying, like, feel your feelings. You are safe to feel your feelings. And that is inner child reprogramming, because we were programmed to feel that it is not okay, it is not safe for me to feel anything other than happy, anything other than good. And then we go into our adult life and we have the law of attraction that says positive vibes only. It's literally just replicating the self-doubt that was caused in our childhood. It is okay to feel your feelings, even if they're not good or positive. Because just because we don't feel them and acknowledge them, it doesn't make them go away. We're just suppressing them in our bodies. We're suppressing them in our energy fields. And that's when it turns into physical ailments and illness. Woo, you guys, I'm getting worked up. Okay, let me keep going with my list before this episode is like 2 hours long. When I get worked up, like, these are topics that I just feel so strongly about. So sometimes I get a little worked up. Okay, so the next one is trust issues. If you have trust issues, definitely doing some inner child healing. And not inner child healing to trust everyone, but inner child healing to trust yourself. That is the most important thing. So no matter what someone does to you, so the trust issues is you're worried about a person taking advantage of you, you're worried about a person leaving you, you're worried about a person cheating on you, whatever the trust issue is, as long as you trust yourself enough to know that no matter what anyone does to you, you have you. And that self-trust and self-reliance is powerful. But a lot of times if we don't love on our inner child and make our inner child feel safe, we don't have that. And so this is a huge one. I used to have trust issues when I was in my early 20s. I didn't trust anyone. But I'm also from New York, and I was programmed not to trust anyone. But I didn't realize until I started doing inner healing how that translated into also not trusting myself. So you guys, it's so powerful. It is so powerful to do this inner work. All right, the next one is extreme worry. So you don't feel safe in connections or environments. So trust issues could just be like, you're watching your back to see if this person lies to you, steals from you, cheats on you, whatever, but like not feeling safe in connections. And so in connections or environments. So if you've experienced any type of physical violence, like you could not feel safe in certain environments. And it's definitely some inner work. I think that if you've experienced physical violence of any sort, definitely working with a licensed therapist for sure. Have I said for sure a lot this episode? That's not a word I usually say. I'm like, why am I saying for sure? I don't know who in my life says for sure. I'm like where I picked that up, but anyways, so the next one is about attention. And this one is a huge one that I had to sit with in my life. So pay attention to how much attention you seek or hide from. So I believe there's two ends of the spectrum. You have your person who wants to be the center of attention, always needs attention, i.e. someone like me. And they need all the attention because their inner child never felt seen. So as an adult, they want to be the center of attention, right? Then the other end of the spectrum is you don't want any attention and you want to be invisible. So either end of the spectrum needs inner child healing. For me, I realized that I seek a lot of attention. I mean, hello, I have a podcast. I basically live my life on social media. I think I have a reality show. Like legit, I think my social media is like keeping up with the Kardashians, but it's like keeping up with Niajae via Instagram. So part of it is because my inner child never felt seen and acknowledged by my parents. And this is a yes and situation. I also wanted to be a celebrity since I literally came out the womb. I was a toddler putting on shows in the park. So I think just that star quality has always been in me, or that desire to be a star has always been in me, coupled with the fact that my inner child didn't feel seen and acknowledged. So that just required me to have double the attention. Hence why I probably love wearing full sequence outfits and, I have purple hair. But it's also, so it's not always a bad thing though. So I personally feel some of the things that came as a result of trauma can actually be superpowers. Because if I didn't need the attention that I needed in my adult life, I probably would have never started this podcast. So while I still needed to heal my inner child stuff, it also allowed me the confidence and courage to really put myself out there. Now, here's where you start peeling the layers back. And when I say it's a never-ending blooming onion, it's like you have these surface layers of healing, and then you peel more layers back because there's always like more, You get to another layer and you're like, man, I feel so healed and whole. And then you're like, oh, but there's more. There's always more. As long as we live, there's always more that we can uncover about ourselves because we're constantly growing and evolving. So I peeled some layers back and realized, okay, a lot of the attention that I want comes from a place of my inner child needing to feel seen and acknowledged and appreciated. But then I'm like, there is a part of me that just wants to be a star. Like I've sang and danced and performed my whole entire life. I am meant to be on a stage, period. And then there's another layer of fearing criticism, and I talked about this in a previous episode, fearing criticism. So it's like the more you peel back the layers, the more you uncover things about yourself of like, okay, this drives me forward, but this holds me back. This drives me forward, but this holds me back. So doing the inner child healing really allows you to consciously identify what your inner child needs and what patterns you have that are propelling you forward and what patterns you have that are holding you back. And there's certain things that I feel like, okay, because of this propelled me forward, which is a good thing. However, because of this held me back and it causes me to shrink. It causes me to dim my light. So doing the inner child healing and really getting to know yourself on a deeper level, getting to know your inner child on a deeper level, it is so extremely powerful. Okay, so the next one is your inner child makes decisions or acts out. I did a trauma-informed program called Do No Harm with Nicole Lewis-Keeber, who is my business therapist, and she talks about how trauma shows up in your business. And if we don't do inner child healing, a lot of times our inner child is in the driver's seat and making decisions for us. And would you want a 7-year-old or a 8-year-old making decisions in your business or in your relationship? No. You definitely do not. So that is why it's important to do that inner child healing, so your inner child is loved, seen, accepted, nurtured, to where it doesn't need to be in the driver's seat, and your adult self can be in the driver's seat. Your adult self can make the decisions. Your adult self could have those important or uncomfortable conversations, and you not be allowing your inner child to be in the driver's seat. And so being able to know when your inner child is in the driver's seat is also very powerful. And you do that through mindfulness and journaling and inner child healing. So I know very much so when my inner child is worked up, and throwing a temper tantrum. And when we get into the 8 ways to practice inner child healing, we'll talk about it a little bit later, like checking into your inner child to see what your inner child needs. But mindfulness allows you to know when that inner child is in the driver's seat. And there's certain times where having your inner child be in the driver's seat is a good thing when it comes to creativity. So being able to know yourself so well, to know if you're operating from ego, to know if you're operating from your inner child, like what part is in the driver's seat. That is powerful, because you don't want certain parts in the driver's seat when it's not the best time for them to be in the driver's seat. Does that make sense? My therapist says there are no bad parts. They're just stuck in a bad job. So you don't want your inner child in the driver's seat when you are at a board meeting or having a conversation with your partner, for example. You don't. But when you are doing something creative, when you're doing something fun, that's when you want your inner child in the driver's seat. Does that make sense? Okay. So here's another one that is really interesting to me. So you have weight that you can't get rid of. So this is a really interesting one. So I have stories that obviously, I never say any names on my podcast, but definitely stories of people who have held on to weight for different reasons. So someone, for example, used to get knocked over by their dog as a child, and it would hurt every time it was like a big dog, let's just say a Great Dane, but it would knock the child over like its tail by mistake, because Great Danes are huge and, little toddlers are little. So the child would put pillows around themselves and like a belt and like layer themselves up with pillows to soften the fall when the dog knocked them over. But then in their adult life, they carried a lot of weight that no matter what diet, no matter what workout plan, they couldn't keep off. And it's because their inner child associated that extra weight with safety. And this happens sometimes with women who have experienced sexual trauma. If they put on weight, they're less desirable to men, and it makes them feel safer. And sometimes it takes a lot of therapy to uncover this being the root cause. But I just want to put out there, like, if you have weight that you just like cannot get off, it could be something from your childhood that there hasn't been healing around. And sometimes we associate that extra weight with safety. So it's really important to do this work. It's really important to do this work. And I think that there's so many benefits of your inner child feeling safe. And not just if you've experienced severe trauma, but even just feeling safe to be all of you, feeling safe to express your emotions, feeling safe to go after big goals. The more your inner child feels safe, the more you're willing to put yourself out there and go for a promotion or start a business or get on a stage in front of people and do whatever it is your heart desires. So I really deeply in the depths of my soul believe that inner child healing is the solution to like 99% of our emotional and mental problems. Seriously. Okay, so if any of these resonated and you're like, okay, where do I start? Where do I start? How do I do it? Sign me up. So I have 8 ways to practice inner child healing. Number 1 is doing inner child meditation. So there's a lot of meditations on YouTube. You can YouTube inner child healing, inner child meditation, and listen to a meditation. There's a ton of meditation apps these days too. Insight Timer, for example. Listen to a couple, see which one really resonates with you. I am in a process of creating some inner child healing meditations, so maybe by the time you listen to this, I'll have some available. But I do have a sound bath. If you are local, definitely come to Bliss Bar Meditation Studio and do the inner child healing meditation. I also do VIP days, so if you do not live in Florida and you want to travel to sunny Florida, we don't have any hurricanes going on right now, so it's pretty safe. Hurricane season is almost over, so if you want to travel and do a VIP day, for me, that is an option. So I'm jumping ahead because work with me is number 8, so you see me getting ahead of myself. Okay, so number 1 is inner child meditation. Do an inner child meditation, a sound bath, listen to some inner child healing music or meditation as you drift off into sleep. It's important that you do it as you drift off into sleep, because when we are drifting off into sleep, it puts us in our theta state, which meditation should put you in your theta state regardless. But when we're drifting off into sleep, we're switching between our conscious mind and our subconscious mind, and a lot of these blocks are stored in our subconscious. So listening to it while you're drifting off into sleep and while you're asleep is helping reprogram your subconscious. That's why inner child meditation, while in a sound bath, is extremely powerful, because it's accessing those subconscious beliefs and blocks. Okay, number 2 is doing childlike activities. So anything silly, anything fun, anything messy. So paint, like anything that really gets your inner child excited. And play is so important. So the benefits of play. I actually talked about the benefits of play on an episode, and I did this exercise, 30 days of play. And I said I would do a follow-up episode on how beneficial that was for me, and I never did it because I don't think I did 30 days of play. I think I fell off probably day 15 or day 20. It is really hard to commit to doing something playful each day, even if it was just like 10 minutes, like dance around your house really silly, like just something silly, something fun, something just allow yourself to be completely ridiculous and don't judge yourself. Like that was like my goal. It was so freaking hard. So hard because I'm super hard on myself, which is why I'm doing the inner child healing. So it was so hard to just be silly and playful. And I'm a silly, playful person, but I don't allow my inner child to play as much as she wants to, which is why she throws temper tantrums because she's in a driver's seat when she shouldn't be. But if I could commit to giving her time to play, even if it's 10 minutes a day, she won't feel the need to be in the driver's seat as much. So you see the benefit of this? You see how powerful this is? So I think I want to revisit that 30 days of play and really try to incorporate the 30 days of play with the inner child meditations that I've been doing. So it's like soothing and playful at the same time. Damn, that's powerful. That is so powerful. All right, number 3 is hug yourself, or like wrap yourself in a blanket. So a lot of times when we had absent or critical parents, what our inner child is craving is nurturing and affection. And so hugging yourself, even like lotioning yourself with like body oil, wrapping in a really like cozy blanket, putting on a onesie. I freaking love onesies. My inner child loves onesies. So doing something really comforting and nurturing for yourself. It's really healing for your inner child. That was number 3. Number 4 is write a letter to your inner child. So if you needed to hear certain things, if you needed to hear, you're beautiful, I believe in you, it wasn't your fault, this shouldn't have happened to you, I'm sorry, I see you, I believe in you, I love you. If you needed to hear these things and you didn't, write a letter to your inner child and say them to yourself. And I would recommend doing this daily. Do it for 30 days. It's important that we are consistent, because if we're not consistent with ourselves, we're replicating behavior that we could have potentially received from a parent. So if you had an absent parent, or if you had, like my dad, for example, would show up, promise me things, and then disappear. So that was a pattern that I had to work through when I started dating, because I was attracted to guys that would do the same thing. And so we don't want to do those patterns to ourselves. So really being self-loyal and being consistent with your inner child healing. You don't want to disappoint yourself. You don't want to disappoint your inner child. So when you commit to doing this practice, you want to make sure you're being consistent. Okay, so the next one is a daily practice, and I mentioned consistency on this one. A daily practice of checking in with your inner child. So what I do is I place my hand on my heart and I check in, especially when I feel my inner child, throwing a temper tantrum. Of course, my inner child is sassy. Like, I'm sassy. You guys know that. I'm from New York too, so I was extra sassy back then. So checking into your inner child and asking, what do you feel? What do you need? And honoring anything that comes up with full acceptance and no judgment. I say that in my meditations, honoring whatever comes up with full acceptance and no judgment. You don't want to judge whatever comes up. If your inner child is like, I want ice cream, go get ice cream, Don't be like, we can't eat ice cream, like it's so fattening, like, oh my God. Like, no, whatever it is, because you have to think, if you judge it or if you ignore it, it's replicating the behavior of potentially your parent. Not saying your parent ignored you, but if they did, and then you ignore what your inner child is saying, you're replicating that behavior, and we want to break that pattern. So checking in, asking your inner child, what do you feel? What do you need? And a lot of times when we check in, our inner child needs love, acceptance, acknowledgement, safety, stability, nurturing. However, our inner child doesn't know how to communicate those things. So it could come up in a different way. So one of the things that I said was ice cream, right? I crave ice cream and cheese. Oh my God, give me some baked brie. Oh, I am like cheese fanatic, but every craving that we have is our body communicating something to us. And craving dairy products is craving a mother's love, a mother's nurturing. So when I check into my inner child and I'm like, what do you need? And ice cream comes up, then I know what I need is nurturing. Every craving we have, our bodies are so fascinating. They're always communicating to us. We just have to understand what it is they're communicating, which is, why I created somatic sound therapy. I have a podcast episode coming up on that soon, and I'll be talking about cravings, physical ailments, tightness, like where we store certain things in our body and what our cravings mean. But for now, just know that every craving that you have or everything that you want to do, even addictions, our addictions are communicating something to us. Like if you're addicted to specific things, it's specific things that your inner child needs. And when we're not getting our needs met, it's like it just creates these toxic patterns. And so when we can meet the need of our inner child, we end the toxic pattern. So your inner child doesn't feel the need to be in the driver's seat and cause havoc in your life and in other people's lives. So that is why inner child healing is so extremely important. And this practice will be challenging because we're not used to listening to our needs. We're used to suppressing them. We're used to ignoring them. We're used to dismissing them because usually that's the behavior that we received as children. If you fell and scraped your knee, your parent is like, "You're okay," completely suppressing and dismissing how you actually felt in that moment, which is why so many people now in their adult life can't identify what they truly feel. And they don't have awareness around it because we have this surface layer of what's acceptable for us to feel. So doing practices like sound therapy and like deep breath work type of thing, it connects you back to your body, which connects you back to your intuition and your feelings. And that is going to be powerful. So you're showing up in life whole, your whole self, and not a fragment of who you are. Whew, you guys. M&Ms, this is so deep, but I'm so passionate about this topic, and I really feel like this is the answer to so many of our mental and emotional problems, the root cause. And sometimes it takes layers and layers and layers to like peel back to get to it. But it's like, if you can find a therapist and a healing modality that is gentle and allows you to feel safe to explore these things, do it, because it will change your life. It'll really help you ground in your confidence and know your worth and be able to live to your full potential. If you don't integrate all of your parts, how are you ever going to live to your full potential if you haven't uncovered all of your parts? So it's important that you acknowledge and accept and love all of your parts, light and dark, doing that shadow work. And inner child healing is shadow work because we all have experienced some type of trauma. So if you take the ACE test and you see that, you've experienced a lot of these things, that is shadow work. And working through that, navigating through that with a licensed therapist will transform your life. It will. Okay. So making sure that you are acknowledging how you felt, especially if you had a parent that invalidated how you felt. So you have gaslighting, you have manipulation. So let's just say a phrase that you've heard a lot in your life is, "Nothing I ever do is good enough for you." That's gaslighting, that's manipulation. It's invalidating how you feel. It's invalidating your needs and your desires. So if you have people in your life that have done that to you and said that phrase, they're invalidating your feelings. And that creates self-doubt. Gaslighting creates self-doubt. And so then you start to question yourself like, man, was I tripping? Did I go too far? Did I do something wrong? Am I wrong? Am I a bad person? Did I ask for too much? Just because someone doesn't have the capacity to fulfill your needs does not make your needs invalid. Your needs and desires are valid, even if someone cannot fulfill them. Just because they cannot fulfill them doesn't mean that you can't have those needs and desires. Sometimes it requires us to fulfill our own needs. So if you need love, if you need acceptance, if you need acknowledgement, if you need safety, if you need stability, if you need nurturing, how are you giving that to yourself? How are you giving that to your inner child? Really powerful. So as you start to do this daily practice of checking into your inner child, make sure you are staying consistent. You don't want to let yourself down. You don't want to let your inner child down. It's important that you stay consistent and you show up for you. You are self-loyal. It's important to show up for you, especially if you didn't have parents that showed up for you. If you had an absent parent, it's even more crucial for you to stay consistent and show up for yourself. Okay, number 6 is surround yourself with emotionally safe people. I have to be honest. Before I started working with my 2 therapists, so I have a regular therapist where we talk about, personal stuff, and then I have a business therapist. Before working with these 2 individuals, I had no idea what an emotionally safe person was. I had no idea. And I had these feelings this doesn't really feel good. But because I've been gaslit so much in my life, I would just brush it off. I'm just tripping. I'm just tripping. And then when I did the Brené Brown Dare to Lead certification and really diving into Brené Brown's work and working with my therapist, I started to see oh no, I wasn't tripping. I was being gaslit. I was being manipulated. I was not tripping. This person was not emotionally safe. And it was very validating for me to know that my intuition that was this doesn't feel right, this doesn't feel good, wasn't tripping. And that's when we start to trust ourselves again. And that's why I find Brené Brown so amazing, because her concept, not her concept, but her recent book, Atlas of the Heart, she talks about the concept of near enemy, which is a Buddhist concept. So she didn't come up with this, but she shares it in her most recent book. It talks about near enemy and how control is the near enemy of connection. And so while you're trying to connect with someone, if they're trying to control the situation, maybe they do it in a way to where they didn't do anything wrong. So you walk away feeling this didn't feel good, but I can't really pinpoint why, because they didn't do anything wrong. If someone's being mean to you, but if someone's just sideline controlling the conversation, it's sometimes you can't pinpoint why a connection didn't feel good. So there's so much, and I'm someone who geeks out on this, obviously. Hello, if you've been listening to this podcast, because I just find it so fascinating how our bodies work, how our energy works, how our minds work. But I know that not everyone is like me and geeks out on this. However, if you want a madly passionate, fulfilling, loving relationship, you have to do this inner work. If you want a ridiculously successful business or empire or a fulfilling career and to live your purpose, you have to do this work. Anything in life that is above average, you have to do this work to break through the barriers, to end the patterns that are no longer serving you, to release the limiting beliefs that are holding you back. You have to do the work. So even if you don't geek out on it and find it fascinating, like I do, if you want to have a fulfilling, amazing, abundant life, you have to do the work and not just go through the motions, truly embody this, really embodying self-acceptance, really embodying compassion and empathy and nurturing, that's going to allow you to show up the best version of yourself. It's going to allow you to know when your inner child should be in the driver's seat and when your adult self needs to be in the driver's seat. So you're making the best decisions. And it takes self-awareness, it takes inner work. And again, I want to say You don't have to go at it alone. You shouldn't go at it alone. Don't go at it alone. A little bit of all three, but definitely working with someone who is a licensed therapist if you have severe trauma. And then, okay, so I feel like I'm jumping around. Let me go back. So number 6 was surround yourself with emotionally safe people. So I was sharing that before I went off my train of thought. I didn't know what emotionally safe people were. And I do have a podcast episode on like, are you emotionally safe? Because like Brene Brown says, compassion and empathy are learned skills. A lot of us didn't learn these skills in our younger years, so we have to learn them as adults. So reading Brene Brown's books or watching her show, she has a show on Netflix, A Call to Courage, and then she has a show on HBO. It's a series, Atlas of the Heart. These are phenomenal. Read any of her books, watch any of her shows, listen to her podcast. It will just help you be a better communicator and an emotionally safe person if you actually integrate and embody these lessons. So that was number 6, surround yourself with emotionally safe people. Number 7 is go to therapy. I mean, I've been saying it throughout the whole entire podcast episode, so I don't really think I need to say any more about it. Find a quality therapist. Quality, because you don't want someone keeping you in a trauma loop. There are therapists that are not that great, probably because they're not doing their own work. So make sure you find a quality therapist. I personally feel like searching for someone who studies IFS is a great route to go. If you're like, I don't know where to start, go to, I think it's like psychology.com, where you can search for therapists. You can actually put in frameworks, you can put in IFS, and it'll bring up a list of therapists that study that modality. So that's a really easy route to go. But there's so many things out there like BetterHelp, and you know, it's so easy to find therapy these days. You just want to make sure it's a quality therapist. And then number 8, so 8 ways to practice inner child healing. Number 8 is work with me. Now, disclaimer, I'm not a licensed therapist. I am a sound therapist, but I'm not a licensed clinical therapist. So what I do would be very different than what a therapist does. So I'm more along the line of life coaching and not therapy. So if you have severe trauma, that's not my wheelhouse. If you are someone who is trying to break through barriers, you want a more successful life, you want to start a business, you want more confidence, you want more courage, I'm your person. And we can definitely do some inner child healing in the realm of sound therapy and journaling. So speaking of journaling, I'm actually releasing a journal series. I'm so excited about it. It's going to be called Alchemy Journals by Niajae. They will be available on Amazon. They're not available yet, but maybe by the time you're listening to this episode, they will be available, because you know this podcast is evergreen. So if you type in Alchemy Journals by Niajae on Amazon, keep checking back. I'm sure in a future episode, once they are available, I will definitely let you know. But I work with my clients a lot on journaling, and journaling with sound therapy, because it allows you to access your subconscious mind. So what I wanted to do was create journals that if you don't live in Florida, or you're not willing to travel to Florida to do a VIP day with me, you still can have access to these really powerful journal exercises that I've created over the years. And when you download the book, or when you purchase the book from Amazon, you will be able to receive a MP3 where you can listen to it as you're journaling. So you're still getting a little bit of that sound healing and healing frequencies as you're doing the journal exercises. So really, really cool. Alchemy Journals by Niajae. So let me do a quick recap. So 8 ways to practice inner child healing. So number 1 is inner child meditations. Number 2 is doing childlike activities, something silly, something fun. Number 3 is hug yourself, wrap yourself in a warm blanket. Number 4 is write a letter to your inner child. Number 5 is do a daily practice of checking into your inner child. Notice when your inner child is in the driver's seat and ask, what do you feel? What do you need? And be gentle with yourself. Your inner child needs nurturing. So practice being nurturing and compassionate to yourself. Number 6 is surround yourself with emotionally safe people. When I started doing this work, I realized I don't have a lot of emotionally safe people in my life, and I had to seek that out. So seek out emotionally safe people. Number 7 is work with a therapist, a quality, keyword, quality therapist. Number 8 is work with me. Just disclaimer, I'm not a clinical therapist. What I do is journal exercises and sound therapy. So a therapist is going to work with you when they're actually speaking. A lot of what I do is help my clients be able to identify on their own what they have going on. So a clinical therapist is going to help you identify your blind spots and uncover, some trauma, some deep trauma that could be from like repressed memories. They uncover repressed memories. What I'm doing is helping people connect back with their body, connect back with their intuition, learn to trust themselves again. So I don't deal with deep trauma. I don't deal with repressed memories. It's more like, okay, if you have a goal, what's standing in the way of that goal? So you can work with someone like me and a clinical therapist because they're going to deal with the heavy stuff. I'm very good at saying this is out of my wheelhouse. If it is out of my wheelhouse, I will let you know. So I just wanted to clarify the difference in working with me and working with a clinical therapist. And a lot of times I feel like certain things are coupled really well together. So if you are working with a clinical therapist, also going to sound baths because it's a very gentle healing, it couples really well. So it's never an either or, it's a yes and I think the more support that you have when you're doing this type of work, the better. Like I say, I have 2 therapists. I have a business therapist and I have a regular therapist, and that allows me to feel fully supported. And that is the main goal of the inner child healing, is how can you feel fully supported so you feel whole to step into your power, to step into your full potential. So what does support look like to you for you to step into your full potential? What is it that you need? What does your inner child need? And those are really powerful questions to journal on. And like I say, honor whatever comes up with full acceptance and no judgment. All right, M&Ms, that is my message for you. I would absolutely love to hear your feedback. You can always reach out to me on Instagram at Niajae, Niajae. And until next time, be decadent. Thank you for tuning in to the Abundance Hack Show. I would love to hear from you. Leave your comments and questions, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any of our yummy episodes. Every time you leave a 5-star rating or review, I do my happy dance.